Taking a look. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jenny from the Chopping Block, Recipes for Success. And today I am so honored and grateful to have Dave Steele on today's show. We have so much to talk about. I just want to introduce him to start. I actually met you about a year ago.
Beginning of this year it was, it's at January time, wasn't it?
Yeah, so a little less than a year ago at the Unblinded event in New Jersey. And I was telling Dave earlier that I thought he was like a celebrity, like just the style, like the way you dressed and, you on stage with, you were sharing your poetry. And it's funny that you say that you got there through Ben Fox because he kind of has that vibe too. Like that,
He's
like
definitely
you
a
guys
character.
I could see how you guys came together and are friends. But I
Yeah,
want to hear more. How do you know Dave? How do you know Ben?
we've been probably connected now for, I'd say, about 5 years or so. It's very strange how it all came about. You talk about things happening for a reason. So we'll kind of get onto my books in a bit, but Ben, when he was first diagnosed with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, which is the same condition that I have and the same condition that Sean has, he was kind of going through the whole thing that most people with a newly diagnosed low vision or blindness condition tend to go through, that loss of independence, loss of confidence and pride, and that big kind of change in your life. And he was really struggling with anxiety and depression for losing his sight. And he kind of turned to my first book and used the poetry as a way of kind of understanding what he was going through. But the biggest thing he said to me, which he only told me just recently, was he was using it as a way of explaining to his grandma everything that he was going through, because she didn't understand how he was blind when he could still see certain things, and she didn't understand how he could not just like take her to the shops in the car like he used to, and how he had to not drive anymore. And so he used the poetry in my first book to kind of explain that. And he recently said to me that it really made the last few years of her life, their relationship, so much better. So he actually reached out to me through Facebook, I think, asking me to come out. This was when he was living in Phoenix, in Arizona. Asked me to come out there and speak at some events, and he'd love to work with me. And it never kind of came about. And then when he got involved with Unblinded, it turned out, he met the person, a guy called Barry Asman, who is my kind of tour sponsor and looks after all my events. He brought me out for my first East Coast USA book tour this time last year. This time last year, I was in New York.
Cool.
And yeah, they connected, and now Barry and Ben are actually working together in Baltimore, and I connected them too, and it's just,
I've heard a
it's
little bit
great.
about that. It's so exciting.
They're doing some amazing things, which some we can talk about, some we can't. But Ben's an amazing guy, and he really is a brother to me.
So beautiful. And I know a little bit about RP, but I don't know a lot about it. So you said that you, Ben, and Sean all have RP. Is that correct me if I'm wrong?
So retinitis pigmentosa, I'll explain what it is and the way it kind of works. So it's a genetic hereditary condition. So there are lots of different variations and strains and mutations of it. But it generally kind of runs in the family. My particular one that I have does run in the family. Comes from my mum's side, so my mum's completely blind with it now, and I've got a couple of sisters with it and uncles and things like that on my mum's side. So the way it kind of presents itself, the way it starts off is generally starts with like night blindness. So very sort of gradual, slow sight loss, as in struggling from light to dark places. So for example, if you're in an outside environment where it's quite bright and you walk into a dimly lit room, a normal sighted person, it'll take them a couple of seconds for their eyes to kind of adjust to the light. Whereas a person with the night blindness, their eyes just won't adjust, or they'll find it very difficult to see in just the slightest changes of light, and they really suffer with glare as well. So bright lights, sunshine can really hurt the eyes. So that's how it starts off with, and then you start to lose your peripheral vision. So they call it tunnel vision. So it's like a tunnel kind of closing inwards, and then your central vision then goes, and then in a lot of cases it results in total blindness. So where I'm kind of at the moment is my left eye has pretty much completely gone now. I've only got light perception in my left eye. So if I put my hand over, I can literally see nothing. It's just completely blurred. And my right eye, I've lost all my peripheral. So it's almost like looking through a straw. So
Okay.
the central vision that I've got is pretty good. I can still see faces. If you were sat right next to me, I'd only be able to see like a part of your face.
Hmm.
But I can still like use my phone if the text is big enough. I can still, watch TV, see, my family. I have a guide dog called Christopher who's just down here somewhere.
Christopher,
He's having a little
cutie.
sleep. It's just his birthday literally a couple of days ago, just turned
Aw,
7.
happy belated.
Yeah, and I use a cane, when I'm out in certain places, but it's an invisible disability because there's no outward signs, and
Hmm.
you always get that thing of, oh, you don't look blind, but I don't know what
Yeah,
blindness is
God,
supposed to look like. So
exactly.
yeah,
And my question to you is because I know that Sean spoke about how his is going into the tunnel, but Ben's still peripheral, right? So is that like a progress? Is that a progression, or is it like?
yeah. I think Sean said is actually the other way, which
Oh,
I've never
sorry.
heard of with RP. He's got peripheral vision, but he's got no central. So his has gone the other way, which is very, very strange for RP. There's a condition called Stargardt's, which is a form of macular degeneration, which is those exactly those symptoms. Whereas with RP, generally, in most cases that I know, it is your peripheral loss first and then your central, or combined at the same time. So yeah, but Sean does seem to have it quite differently. But Ben's kind of the same as me as well, but he's had some additional issues with his eyes where he's had detached retinas and things like that. So, but yeah, it's there's lots of different variations, and obviously being hereditary as well. There's with the particular type that I have, one of the hardest parts for me is, and I've written poetry about it, is there's a 1 in 2 chance that my son, my 7-year-old son Austin, and my 13-year-old daughter Ellie will develop it when they're older. But because of the way my mutation develops, we won't know until generally late teens, early 20s, which is when you normally get that first kind of stage. Because that's when I started to probably have the night blindness effects, but it was very gradual, and I didn't probably realize it as much back then. And it wasn't up until I think I was 38, nearly 39 when I was diagnosed, and that's when it took a massive dip. So
Gotcha.
it varies.
Okay. And so during that time, you said you had a number of people in your family that have had it. Like, did you reach out to them to kind of like ask for advice or like someone
Yeah,
more better understanding? Was there something maybe they told you that was like really helped you through dealing with the challenges of?
absolutely. Probably the biggest advice I had was actually my sister. I've got a sister called Leslie who was the first one to be diagnosed with it, and she was diagnosed in the early 80s in a hospital in London called Moorfields, which is now one of the kind of leading hospitals in the world for low vision and sight loss and blindness
Oh, wow.
conditions. But when she was diagnosed in the early 80s, they didn't know a lot about it at all. And she was pretty much told in a very cold and clinical kind of way, oh, you've
Not
got this thing
surprised.
called, you've got this thing called RP. You're going to go blind when you're older. Oh, and by the way, don't have kids because it's hereditary. And that's pretty much all they were told. And
Oh,
she was like, but that's not changed. She's had 2 children. But yeah, so when I was first diagnosed and really struggled for a while, which we'll kind of get into, the biggest advice she gave me was to talk to other people who were going through the same thing. So that was kind of what
beautiful.
introduced me to the world of social media, was
Mhm.
getting involved. And it's nice to see it used in a kind of positive way, which we're seeing more of now since COVID came in. But
Because we need
to
each
kind
other.
absolutely to connect with people and speak to other people that are going through the same thing, because you know with not just with RP or with different blindness conditions, but with a lot of kind of big diagnoses, it is very done often in a very cold and clinical way. With matter of fact, doctors aren't
Mhm.
trained in giving a hug or these kind of things. It's just they've
Or
got to
maybe
kind of
I always thought about that. Maybe they're desensitized. Because I even know when I was
yeah.
like an EMT, like I was a little bit desensitized after a minute. It's like it's kind of not
I,
making excuses because I
I
trust
think
me,
that's
I
a
know.
natural thing, isn't it, to kind of desensitize yourself to it. But it's difficult, isn't it? So the best way is to speak to other people, especially with something like this, because the doctors still only know so much about it. And I'll often speak to people around the world who are going through something similar to me, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm experiencing that," and we all are. And then you speak to a doctor about it, and you tell them that you've got this, and they go, "Oh, that's nothing to do with the condition," but it is. But there's so people are going through. People who are going through the same thing as you know more.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I love that distinction. I want to definitely talk more about your poetry, and I'm grateful. I mean, I don't want to cry, but you said you're going to share one of your poems.
I'll share as many as you like.
But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about, how you went from your singing career into poetry, and like we were talking about how sometimes in life, like, things are a progression, so it leads you somewhere you never knew would be like your spot. Like, you've wrote over now 800 poems. You've won, you're an award-winning poet. You run one of the largest support groups. I have chills talking about it. Can you just tell me a little bit how that happened? Like, what did you learn from singing, say? Because you haven't been singing since, did you say 2016? I forget.
Yeah, about that, I think it is, yeah. Okay. No, well, actually, probably maybe 2017, 2018, I think. I'm not too sure. The time goes. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just like, if I've learned one thing from this whole experience is, I'm a great believer that kind of everything happens for a reason now. I said it earlier before we started the call, when we were talking backstage, and I was saying about how I'm a great believer that everything we kind of go through and all our challenges that we face in the past give us the ability to do things and face the things we're meant to going forward. And that's certainly been the case with me. I worked about just over 20 odd years as a singer. Started when I was 18, when I left college here in the UK, and kind of traveled all over the world. And yeah, the way it kind of came about with me was when I was diagnosed with RP. It was, so I'll give you a kind of overview of what happened. Was really, you talk about things happening for a reason and facing challenges. So I have my daughter Ellie that I just spoke about, who's 13 now.
I love their names. You said Ellie and Austin?
Yeah, so it's Ellie Darling Steele is my daughter.
Oh my God.
So she lives in Glasgow with her mum. Me and her mum split up in end of 2011, and when me and her mum split up, it was quite a horrible end to the relationship, and I ended up like leaving with nothing, and I moved back to Manchester and was really in a very low place. I was driving from Manchester back to Glasgow, which is like 3.5 hours each way, to get to Glasgow and back every other weekend, just to see my daughter, and trying to kind of start things all over again.
Where is Glasgow?
Glasgow's in Scotland.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's about 250 miles from here, but it's about 3.5 hours in a car. So I'd moved back to Manchester, which is where I'm from originally, after living in Glasgow for the best part of 10 years. Kind of started again, and then what happened was, that was in the end of 2011. In 2012, in the February, I met my now wife Amy, and she had 2 boys from a previous marriage, Harvey and Louis, and they were of a similar age to Ellie. And literally, the moment we met, we went out on a date. We realized that we had lots of friends in common. We'd grown up around the corner from each other. We went to the same primary school, the same sort of elementary school, you'd call it, as each other, but all in different years, because there's a 6-year age gap. And we just hit it off straight away. And when Ellie met her boys, Harvey and Louis, it just fit. And
so cute.
a few months later, she fell pregnant with Austin really quick. And then Austin was born in June 2013. And on Christmas Day 2013, I proposed to Amy. And she said yes, obviously. And then we set our wedding date as being New Year's Eve 2014. And what happened was,
that sounds so fun.
everything was going well. Everything was amazing. We started off 2014 saving for our wedding, and then in March of that year, I went for a routine eye test, and Amy was sat outside in the waiting room with Austin in a car seat, and they looked into the back of my eyes and they said, the pigment's really quite thick. We think the RP's really advanced very quickly. You need to stop driving straight away. And from that moment, I knew my whole life was going to change. And I remember walking out almost like in slow motion to kind of break the news to Amy what was happening. I told my employer, I was working in car sales at the time, they let me go because I couldn't do any test drives. I couldn't drive anymore, so they let me go. I couldn't do any gigs anymore because I couldn't drive to the gigs and perform as a singer. And a week later, I was diagnosed as being legally blind, or what they call severely sight impaired here in the UK. And that first kind of 8 months, we applied for benefit support. There was a 9-month waiting list for that, of paperwork and trying to get assessed. We applied for, grants to kind of help us from different charities, got turned down, fell behind in our rent, had to feed our kids some food parcels, had to eventually lost our house and had to move. And we was really in a dark place because we found out there was a 1 in 2 chance that Austin and Ellie were going to go blind when they're older, which I only found out when we were going through the process of me being diagnosed. And I was losing my sight fairly rapidly. I lost all my peripheral in about 8 months. And all that while in those months, I was feeling guilty for the financial pressure that I was putting on my family. We were saving for a wedding, everything had fallen down. I was, falling into depression, struggling with anxiety, feeling guilty. I'd lost my confidence. I'd lost my pride. I'd lost my independence. I couldn't go out on my own. I didn't go out the house on my own for just over 8 months without Amy. I was holding onto the pram because when you've got like tunnel vision and you're kind of walking about and people will just like appear from the side, you kind of get startled and it makes you really anxious. So I was really, really struggling. And then it just all changed. I said my sister was the one that said, get involved on social media. I started speaking to other people on some of these support groups, and they were talking to me, and I was realizing that I was going through a lot of the similar things that they had been going through. I felt like I was less alone. And they said that some of the people I got to know who were from the same kind of area as me invited me to a support group, a physical one.
Oh, beautiful.
To come and like be with other people in the same situation.
How is that in comparison to the online stuff?
I felt so scared. I remember feeling like, first of all, being around other people who were going blind or were blind was like a glimpse into the future. So that made me feel nervous about the prospect of doing that. Being around people who were using canes or having guide dogs, I felt really nervous about that. But what happened was, when they heard I worked as a singer, and they said, "Oh, would you be the entertainment for the day?" So I was like, absolutely, because that for me was my comfort zone. Being on stage is my comfort zone. You know what it's like yourself. Being in an environment where you're talking to people makes you feel relaxed. And this is what I said before about things you go through in the past, give you the ability to face the things going forward. My ability as a singer sort of made me feel comfy in that situation. So as soon as he said, would you do that? I was like, absolutely. And this is where it all changed for me. The night before the event, I was in bed. My wife, Amy, was trying to get to sleep next to me. I was going over ideas of songs to sing the following day. And I just had this moment. It was almost like a eureka moment where I thought, what if I take a song that everyone knows so they can all sing along to it, but change the words so it would have more of an emotional response, more of an impact with them? So I chose Stand By Me by Benny King because it's one of those songs that everyone knows.
I know you've said it a few times. Can you just give me one line? Can you just sing one line, please?
When the night has come and the land is dark. I'm not going. So the opening line is, when the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, because that described night blindness.
Beautiful.
As I was just talking about. So I
don't think I'll ever hear that song the same again.
So I rewrote the song, I rewrote 2 new verses, changed the chorus up and made it Stand By Me RP. And I went and performed it the first time that day at that support group meeting. And actually the video of me singing that is actually on YouTube.
Cool.
at that support group.
Can I
Yeah,
post it in the link here?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
and you get
cool.
to see the reaction in the room, and
Wow.
it was overwhelming. People were in tears. People were happy, singing along. There was people coming up to me and hugging me afterwards, saying that I was able to describe how they'd always felt about their low vision or their blindness, but they couldn't find the words themselves. And that was just a really unique way of getting a message across. Because, that's the thing with music and poetry, which, is the same thing. It has this ability to kind of get us through these moments. We've all had like a particular song that's maybe gotten us through a teenage breakup or something like that. When we're teenage angst sat in a room crying, listening to
Absolutely.
Radiohead or whatever.
Music. When you're sad, music, you actually understand the words.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I remember having that idea of going, hang on a minute, that is just such a great way of being able to get a message across. I can't believe there isn't anyone else out there in the blind community doing that, especially after seeing the impact. And literally, as soon as I did that song, I then recorded it at a friend's house, put it on YouTube. I started to get messages from people all over the world saying the same thing, and I started posting it on some of these support groups that I'd already been on. And people literally were, I was getting messages all the time saying the same thing as those people in the room. You're able to describe how I feel with your words, and I feel less alone, and it was helping people.
Beautiful.
And for that first time, I just felt like I had a purpose again, because I'd lost my way. I didn't know what I was going to do next. And all of a sudden, I just found this ability to help people through what I was going through. And that's the thing with, with social media and talking and all these kind of support groups, it heals us as well, helping other people.
That's one of the best ways.
It was healing me. And I remember saying to Amy that night, the night before that support group, I've had this idea. It's going to change everything. And she was like, yeah, I mean, what are you going to think with that? But I just knew that it was going to send us on a journey. I never had any idea where it was going to go, and I could not have predicted where it's taken
me. But did you
feel
it?
But I felt it, absolutely. Okay. I knew, and I remember saying to people afterwards, the more I was writing, because I started writing poetry every single day, 2 or 3 a day, to the point where, as I said, a year later, I had over 100. And it was just pouring out of me. And I'd never written poetry before. I'd written a couple of songs, but nothing, nothing of any kind of great quality. But when I started doing this and talking about what we were going through as a family and good days, bad days, everything, I promised that I wouldn't hold back, that I'd share everything. Because I think that's what great artists do, isn't it? You think about some of the great singers and performers and rap artists and things like that. They don't hold back. They share what's going on really with them. And I promised that I was going to do that straight away. And I did, and I took it to some really dark places, but it was those ones that, I could write. And I've never written anything that's taken me longer than 20 minutes, but I can write a piece of poetry, click a button, send it around the world, and it'll land with someone who's maybe just been diagnosed, who is in a really dark place, and they'll read those words in their own voice in their head when they're reading them as well. So it's almost like they're talking to themselves.
Yep.
And when they're hearing my words, they're saying it to them, and it makes them feel like they're less alone. And that is such a powerful thing, and it's something I just don't take for granted.
Do you remember the first poem you ever wrote?
Yeah, I do. I know it off by heart.
Can we hear it? Or a line from it, maybe?
I can give you the poem. I can give the full poem. It talks about the misconceptions about, people not looking blind and what it does to us. It was actually the first poem in my first book, Stand By Me RP, named after that song. And it's the one that I generally, when I'm doing an event, I will always start. I won't say anything. I just walk up and I read this poem. I don't say a word. I just walk up with my cane and I stand there and I say this. I have a secret from the world that most of you don't know. You won't hear it in the way I talk, and eyes no clue will show. If you listen to my story, something new to learn you'll find. For though I'm looking straight at you, I'm legally blind. It's not a simple yes or no. I'm more a shade of grey. I rarely venture out alone as things get in the way. For what I see affects my days in much more ways than one. And this for some continues until little left has gone. But still this pain's invisible to those that passers by. There's some afraid to hold a cane because of questions why. Accused of making up our claim and made to feel a fraud. feel drained of all my confidence, feel trapped behind this door. Now, hardest thing to come to terms that makes my days feel long. It holds us back, knowledge they lack for all who've got it wrong. To hear their judge and jury, even though their facts aren't straight, feel misdirected fury, wish opinions now could wait. To take the time to get to know the visions that we share. Come join me in my tunnel, hold my hand and show you care.
Wow. So beautiful. Wow. And I just have a question because I feel like you said, it made you lose confidence, but it's like, how could it make someone like you lose confidence? Like for all you've done, like all you're doing.
But it's not confidence, like it's only confidence in situations that most people take for granted. Lack of confidence in situations most people take for granted. When you have a disability and blindness and low vision, every time you step outside your door, you've got to think about it. The simplest of journeys. So I'm still confident, you know, on stage, and that will never change no matter what. But I'm not confident walking down the street in a crowded place, or you know, in low light situations. There's another strange thing. I was talking about this the other day, and you don't get many people talking about this, but you're going to understand what I'm about to say. See, when you have low vision, right? Because I've got like just like a small tunnel of vision there in my my right eye. What happens is when you are in a social situation, say you're in a restaurant or a bar, and you're with a group of people or whatever, what tends to happen is, you know, we've all done these courses, which I'm sure you've done a load of, where they talk about non-verbal communication.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But so when you've got low vision and you've got no peripheral, you can't pick up on social cues.
But you can in the tone, no?
In tone, but you miss handshakes. You subconsciously you look at people's mouths when you're speaking to them, you lip read, and when you've got a group conversation going on, and you can't see these things, you'll tend to find that people like myself will fade away into the background and become very anxious because they can't pick up on these social cues, and they become very isolated and distanced. So, you know, situations like that. And also the other thing as well, which is another very strange thing about the type of condition I have, because it's a retinal disease. So the retina is the thing on the back of the eyes that sends the signal to the brain for the brain to kind of translate what the eyes are seeing. So because my retinas are pretty much dead, what happens is that they can't take certain signals. So, for example, if I'm in a park or an outside area where it's quite empty and there's not a lot going on in my view, I feel like I can almost see pretty normally. The brain does a thing of filling in the blanks for what you can see and what you actually can't. But what happens is, and this is where it's not cool, is if I turn a corner and all of a sudden there's lots of movement, i.e. lots of people moving about, cars, whatever, my retinas can't deal with that, and in a split second my eyes go completely fogged over and I can't see a thing. So I could literally be walking down the street where it's quite quiet, turn a corner, and all of a sudden my vision's taken from me. And that just makes you feel so anxious. It also, with films as well, if I'm watching like a movie where there's all of a sudden an action scene and there's lots of kind of movement going on in the action scene, everything goes blurred and I can't see it because my retinas can't deal with it. So there's lots of different aspects to living with a condition of low vision like I have that a lot of people don't realize. People think that when you've got a certain eye disease or an eye condition that you see one way all the time. And my sight is affected by sunlight, low light, if I'm ill, if I'm run down, if I'm stressed, the amount of things that's in my view, lots of different things affect the way I see.
Wow. Okay.
The eyes are complicated things, they are.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of stuff that I kind of write about in everything that I do.
And so I know, so you say you're an advocate for the blind. So not only do you run the support group, so what does that mean to you? How does that play out?
I've become to be known as, they say the blind poet now. Okay. And when I talk, I always say that, actually, I don't consider myself a poet as such, even though I've written 3 books now and got more in the way and 800 poems. The poetry to me is a means to an end. That was just the way I
Got it.
found to be able to kind of impact people and connect people. My wife said it to me best. She said a while ago, she said, what you try and do, Dave, is you try and just be there for people in a way that you wanted someone to be there for you at the beginning of your journey. And that's the thing that drives me every day is,
Beautiful.
how can I find a way to support other people? That's what it's about for me. I still have bad eye days. I had an awful one today where I've had a real
Really?
bad pressure headache all day. It's quite sunny outside, and my eyes were hurting so much in the sunlight. I had to kind of pull all the blinds down so there was no sunlight coming into the room. There was no chance of me being able to get out on my own. And when I have those days where I struggle, whether it be with my eyes or anxiety, my first thought now is, how can I use what I'm going through
Mhm.
to impact somebody else?
Mhm.
So I'll write about it
I,
and use
I,
social media to
def-
connect.
I definitely hear you on that. That's amazing. And it helps, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got a support group now, which is kind of built up from the poetry, but it's not just. I support people through the poetry when they discover it and read it, but also I always say to them, I don't just write the words; I mean every single one. So
Mhm.
if you need me, send me a message and I'll call you. So there's lots of kind of people I've got all over the world where I've connected with families of children that are losing the sight, and and people who are losing theirs, and I speak
Mm,
to, for example, when I was in I talked about earlier when I was on my first USA book tour this time last year. I toured the whole of the East Coast,
so cool.
and I actually I had a couple of amazing moments, which I can kind of tell you about, but one in particular was there's a girl, a family who are from Amarillo in Texas, and there's a little girl called Jackie Wilson, great name. Um, and when she was 6 years old, she was diagnosed with RP and another condition called Best disease. And she's the only person in the world that has these two conditions together. So she was losing a central vision and a peripheral at the same time at the age of 6. And her mum started reading my poetry to her as a way for her to kind of understand what she was going through. And she was being bullied at school for using her cane by some kids, just being mean, and she used some of the lines in my poetry to come back at these bullies.
Mhm.
So her mum contacted me through Facebook and said, told me about Jackie, and I immediately said, right, I'm calling her. So I did a video call through Facebook, and we started speaking, and we started talking regular, and then she started to really really struggle with the way she was feeling about her sight. So I thought, right, what can I do? So I wrote a poem about her, and I called it Jackie. And I put it in my second book, Stand By Me RP Volume 2, but I didn't tell her. And then when
Oh
the
my
book came
God.
out, I sent her the first copy of the book, and I called her, and she went skipping into school going, I'm in a book, I'm in a book. And when I did my book tour this time last year, um, her and her family traveled all the way from Amarillo in Texas to Baltimore to come and see me speak at the National Federation for the Blind's annual conference in Baltimore, and they brought Jackie to meet me,
Oh my
and we
God. Can
met.
you
She's
imagine?
now 11. She's 11 now, and we met, and she sat on my knee, and I read her a poem from her book, and we spent the weekend together with the family, and I have all amazing moments like this thanks to being able to do this stuff. It's so cool.
And I know that's a big passion of yours is that I know we spoke about kids. I thought you meant like your kids, but you're talking about kids that are struggling through this as well. Like, what does
Yeah,
that mean to you to be able to connect? Like, I mean, it's
it's
a
great.
loaded question. Of course, you feel
No, it's great.
amazing that you could
Yeah,
impact them in that way,
I
but
mean, since COVID came about, and we've all been doing these Zoom calls. I've been doing a lot of kind of poetry workshops for different schools for the blind. When I was here this time last year in New York on the book tour, I went and did a talk in a place called the Lavelle School for the Blind in the Bronx, and
oh my God.
getting to
See, I've
speak.
always been heavily involved in the deaf community, so I didn't know of any of the blind schools, but the Bronx, one of my favorite schools for the deaf is there.
Which one's that?
It's right off the Parkway over the bridge. I forget the exact name,
Okay.
but it's
Yeah, there's a couple of schools in New York that for visually impaired children and children with disabilities that I've kind of I do stuff for. Because, you know, even though the poetry is about low vision and blindness, there's a lot of themes that I talk about within the poetry that many other people, you know, relate to. For example, last year, another cool thing I got to do on the tour was I actually got invited to speak at a veterans concert on Veterans Weekend in Baltimore. And initially, I was supposed to be going as a guest. And a couple of days before the event, they said, "Would you come on stage and speak?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Absolutely." And I stood in front of 500 veterans, all the Marines in full dress uniform, you know, all the army and everything, all the forces, and read a poem. I think it's the poem actually I read that you heard me read at the Unblinded event. And it speaks about anxiety and battling with depression and all these kind of things. It tells my story. And I got a standing ovation from 500 veterans at this concert, and it was just like goosebumps. It was crazy. So
So,
yeah,
so basically, you're not only you're famous, but you're cooler than famous. So I was
I thought
on to
about that.
something.
You know, I never take it for granted. You know, my wife never gets surprised now with the stuff that kind of I get to do. But for me, it's every time's like the first time. Every time I get a message, it's like the first, like the first one to me. It's just, you know, I never take that for granted.
So beautiful. Is there any other piece that you want to share with us today?
I can. There's a couple actually. There's one. We talked about the kids, and we were kind of talking about that then. So there's one I'll share with you on that, and then there's another one I'll kind of finish with. So with my children, as I said, there's a 1 in 2 chance that both my son Austin and my daughter Ellie will lose their sight when they're older. Now, with Ellie, because she is from a previous relationship and that relationship has been strained, it's quite a tricky situation because, you know, when's the right time to have that conversation to kind of tell a child that, you know, or if you should have that conversation of telling a child they've got a 1 in 2 chance when they're older, you know, of going blind. The thing is that kind of makes you want to do that is because the internet being the way it is, it's quite easy to kind of reach search stuff, especially when I've got such a presence out there as I have to kind of find out stuff. So I'd rather she found it out from me, and I'm
Absolutely.
always big at asking questions. So a while ago, I wrote a poem because I write about everything, as I said. I wrote a poem called "The Secret," and it's about when's the right time to have that conversation. I'll read it for you now, and you'll understand. You'll
I love the
put your put,
title.
put your mind to
I
yourself.
love it already. No.
Okay, it goes like this. It took me years to come to terms with how my eyes declined, through stages of acceptance, of slowly going blind. But nothing I could ever do would allow me to prepare to tell my little girl a thing I still don't want to share. It's tortured me through sleepless nights, consumed my mind with guilt. The secret I have kept from her could break the trust I've built. I pray that she will understand the things I've tried to do and why I never told her that she could be 1 in 2. For she is still a child and far too young to burden with a fate that I might pass to her, for now is her time to live. But soon will come a moment when I know she must be told. When all the battles I have won, I'll pass for her to hold.
So
But for
beautiful.
every unheard question, there's an answer I've prepared. They're written in each line, each verse, each poem that I've shared. For every page I've filled, I've emptied out my heart and soul. So one day she would know the way. That's always been my goal. So, Ellie, I hope years from now you'll be there reading this. Know you can do amazing things, whether RP hit or miss. My inheritance to you won't be a passed down faulty gene, but knowing all life's beauty that this VIP has seen.
Whew. Whew. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
I think I wrote that in about 5 minutes. It literally just like, I just
Gorgeous.
went.
I keep wanting to ask you, like, what's been the biggest blessing?
When I think there's a lot of things, but to kind of narrow it down, I think anyone that goes through a kind of life changing diagnosis or situation or anything like that, they all seem to have this new kind of outlook on life. And I
Mhm.
think, as much of a cliche as it sounds, like the vision I have in here, compared to what I had before I started to lose my sight, is completely night and day different. The way I look at life, I always say that I'm happy for my blindness. I'm happy for
Mhm.
this journey. It changed me as a person. It taught me to focus on what's really important in life, appreciate what's important every day, use the little sight that I've got left to really see the beauty in this world. It made me a better friend, a better husband, a better father because of my outlook on life. So you know, I'm really, that's one of the things I'm really grateful for, is the way that kind of focuses you. And I think that's quite common. You know, I speak to a lot of people that have maybe had like cancer diagnosis and things like that, and you look at the world in a new way. So I actually see more now than I did before I started to lose my sight.
Absolutely. You took my words away.
Yeah,
So beautiful. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
you're welcome.
Whew. And the next poem that you wanted to share, what was the context that you wrote this one?
Well, you know, as you know, I do these weekly Zoom webinar calls every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, which is 9 p.m. UK time. It's been entitled Tea and Poetry, my kind of team that look after me in America now and look after all my events. To get a big shout out to Ben Fox, who's part of the team, Barry Asman, who's from the Low Vision Specialists in Maryland and Virginia, who were my tour sponsors, and now he kind of looks after all my thing. We do this Tea and Poetry Zoom call every Wednesday. Anyone can kind of come and listen in. But what it is it's basically, it's an hour of chat about all things low vision. We have special guests most weeks now, and I always write some new poetry or read some new poetry every week. And the one I did Wednesday just gone, literally a couple of hours before, I thought, right, I'm going to write something new. And I had one of these moments where I just like started to write. There was a lot of things I wanted to talk about, and I just started to write this piece of poetry. And when I read it to Ben on that call, he cried instantly. And that's always my kind of like gauge on if it's a good
You want
one.
to hit
Like,
us right here.
yeah, when when I first started writing, you know, all those years ago now, when I first started writing, what I'd do is I'd read every single one to Amy, and if she burst out crying, I knew it was a good one. And literally, she, you know, I had
It
to
takes
stop
a
doing
lot
it.
for me to cry these days, and I have
I
a
had to
trick.
stop
I
doing it
always
after a
go in my
while.
eyeball
That
and lick the tears.
that
I'm like, all
that
right,
was
I'm
that
good.
was how I'd gauge it, is how distraught she got. I was like, you know, the part of me would be upset that she was crying, and then part of me would be like high fiving myself, going, "Oh, it's a good one."
You made her feel her pain.
Yeah, totally. Yes, I got them. But so yeah, I wrote this one the other day, and Ben's turned around and said, you know, this could possibly be, you know, the
Ooh.
best poem about low vision. It really describes everything in a nutshell. So what I want to share this one with you, and then if you've got any questions about the content, I want you to ask me them.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Wait, as we go.
After it,
Okay, got it.
I'm sure you'll pick up stuff. I've
Okay.
called it. It's entitled "Blind Perceptions," and I'm going to read this one. I've got my iPad down, so I'm looking down and kind of
Okay,
reading it.
gotcha.
I know there's strength inside of you, though all you feel is numb. Don't be afraid as eyesight fades for what is still to come. You will adjust. In these words, trust. We share these tunneled eyes, a mix of strength and anxiousness. The same in me applies. My shins are full of bruises and my confidence misplaced. At times, self isolated, felt the world too much to face. So I'm here to remind you all the times we fail don't matter. There are lots of misconceptions still. Let's remind them of the latter. It's not that complicated. Change how blindness is defined. Let's educate, articulate the many ways we're blind. It's never all or nothing, many shades and different views. But there's this stereotype they keep on printing in the news. No wonder some of us have fears when out in crowded place. They see the cane but can't explain why we look them in the face. There's some of us who stay at home, convinced of the excuse that because we don't look blind enough, there's a need to be recluse. Don't waste your life on people whose opinions are way off. Just swipe your cane with courage. Hold your head with pride aloft. So never doubt what we're about, despite what some believe. Come join me on my mission, change the way we are perceived. I won't let the haze that fills my eyes consume the rest of me. There's more to life than edge of knife, despite what I can't see. Try not to care as people stare with looks of vague suspicion. But why should I explain to them the terms of my condition? Though it's much simpler to stay home, won't waste another day. Their pity's just an obstacle that's getting in my way. Though I am blind, won't be confined by others' misconceptions. This poetry that spills from me will change their blind perceptions. Though anxious chest and days depressed have far from disappeared, I've learned to breathe while I still grieve, control these things I've feared. My kids look on, not on what's gone, but all each day I teach. For if tomorrow their eyes pay, life's dreams are still in reach. So I'll not cry as vision dies, won't focus on the blur. No point in holding on, point in holding on to how those days and eyes once were. There you go.
Beautiful. Oh gosh. So I still want to ask you about like what is it about like the misconceptions that's like so painful?
Yeah, well, this is a point I really love to get across. So I always say that actually it's not the effects of a condition of blindness that are the hardest part that most people struggle with. It's not, you know, losing your sight or not being able to see faces or anything like that. It's actually the misconceptions that make people struggle the most. A lot of people still to this day think you are either completely blind or not at all.
Isn't it like 80% or
it's actually
more?
90, I think it's about 93% of people with low vision or blindness in their life have some kind of useful vision. Only
Beautiful.
something like 7% of people see nothing at all.
I didn't know that till the last couple of years, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a massive misconception. So when people like myself are out, if you make eye contact with them, they think you're faking it. If you get your mobile phone out or your cell phone, as you guys call
I see
it,
now.
when you are on public transport, they'll accuse you of being fake. It happened to me.
How do you not fight somebody?
Ago. Happens to me all the time. Not it happens to most people all the time, but not long ago. In fact, it was just before Christmas last year. I got back from my East Coast USA book tour. Normally, when I'm doing events here in the UK, I'll take Christopher, my guide dog, with me. I'll use McCain if I'm going to the gym.
What kind of dog is he? I forget.
I can show you actually. This Christopher.
Christopher.
Come here.
Where is he? Oh, baby. Is he the cutest thing in the whole world with his tongue sticking out? Christopher.
Oh, there he is. That's my Chris.
Aww.
So
he loves you, huh?
I'll tell you, you talk about things happening for a reason. Here's the strangest thing. Listen to this. This will give you goosebumps. Right? Before I get onto Chris and answer that question. See, when my first book came out, Stand By Me RP, obviously I told you it became number one European poetry release on Amazon in both America and Australia in its first week. Volume 2 did it in its first day. But when my first book came out, I became a published author for the first time ever. The day it came out, it went live on Amazon. Myself and Amy were driving to go and celebrate. We were on our way to a restaurant in the middle of the afternoon. I'd been on the waiting list for a guide dog for 18 months. The phone rang.
Oh my God.
Guide Dogs Charity called me up and said, "We found a match for you that day." And a few days later,
what did you do?
Literally, the phone rang. I remember my cell phone rang.
Oh my God.
We were driving to the restaurant, all hyped about the book. We pulled over.
Oh my God.
And Amy was like looking at me going, "What is it? What is it? What is it?" I came off the phone and I went, "They found me a match. I'm going to meet my guide dog in a couple of days." And we both burst out crying.
Oh my gosh.
Went to the restaurant. It completely it was like
another
over
world.
emotions.
Yeah. Wow.
I met him a few days later and everything else. So as I was saying there, so I used my guide dog Chris and I used McCain. But when I did my East Coast book tour, I'd been to America, and it was I was out there for like just under 4 weeks, and I was using McCain everywhere. In New York, going through like Penn Station, using McCain.
Are you saying it because it pissed you off?
Huh? What's that?
Did New York piss you off?
I know, I loved it.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, so going through New York, meet and create, like the level of crazy people in New York, like getting shouted at by homeless people and stuff like that.
Oh
I
my
think I had that my
gosh.
first night. Someone was begging outside. I came out the first time I hit New York City. I come out of Penn Station, Madison Square Gardens, and it was like, for me, it was like walking into you'd see this, like how it was on TV in the films.
I got yelled
Walking
at
out
by
to
a homeless
Madison,
person last
yeah.
time I was there. I'm like, listen, take it easy on me, all right?
Well,
I didn't even say shit.
well, I walked out in Penn Street Station, and like I was like, "Wow, this is awesome!" And I'm trying to walk with Barry Asman. We're walking to try and get a cab, and I must have walked past a homeless guy who was trying to beg for something. And because I'm using my cane, he doesn't see that I'm blind. I've walked past him, and because I've ignored him, he then starts shouting abuse at me, like swearing at himself,
Yeah.
like I'm in New York. Yeah.
Oh my God. My homeless guy said to me, what are you scared of the black man? And I'm like, actually, I'm not. I was like, what do you mean?
I had my first street crazy, and I saw my first case of road rage where a guy jumped out on the freeway. We got stuck in traffic. A guy jumped out on the freeway in front of the car in front of us, and then started punching the windshield.
Dude, that was the time before. A girl almost got hit by the car, and she was a young girl. She kicked the door as hard as she could. I was like, only in New York.
Yeah, that's awesome. But
and the car just looked at her like she was nuts and kept driving. I'm like,
we have stuff like that here in Manchester, but in New York, it's a good
one. You definitely have that tough. I like it.
But so anyway, I was really confident in using my cane by the time I got to Manchester, back home to Manchester. And so on our first opportunity to go out with Amy and Austin, we've gone to like these kind of Christmas markets, and it was really busy there. And I'm walking with my cane, and I was walking down this street, and there was a group of young guys walking towards me, and I caught eye contact with one of them, and this guy just like started shouting to his mates, "Oh, look, he's faking it! Look, pretending to be blind." And they'd gone past me by the time I'd heard what they said, and Amy and Austin were behind me, and I turned around. Amy was shouting at them, and I just looked at my son Austin, who was 6 at the time, and he was just upset, going, "Why are these guys shouting at my dad?" And I just remember, like, it just spoilt the night for me. And I remember thinking, can't I just go somewhere without my blindness or low vision being the cause of some kind of trouble? So those misconceptions to me are such an important thing. The biggest thing it causes is, and this is a big part of everything that I do in my poetry that I'm going to explain to you now, because of these misconceptions, and a lot of it is just down to lack of education, lack of awareness.
That's with everything, right?
Yeah, but the biggest problem it causes is because of those situations like that and fear of being judged, using your cell phone and all those kind of things, of people not understanding. What it does is, there's a lot of people around the world who will not use their cane in public because of fear of being judged. They will not apply for a guide dog, and they end up not going out and being isolated. And I'll speak to people all over the world, and they'll say, or they'll say to me, "Oh, I'm not blind enough to use a cane yet," or "I'm not blind enough to apply for a guide dog yet." And I say to them, "Okay, well, do you find yourself like not going out to certain places and staying home more and becoming more isolated because of the way your sight is, because you can't see in dimly lit rooms or busy places and things like that?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, in that case, you're blind enough, you're ready." But because they don't fit in this perceived box of what blindness apparently looks like, they end up becoming isolated. And so many people become shut-ins, and especially guys, because guys have this kind of like, I'm a man and I've got to be the protector and I've got to, be able to look after myself. And when you can't see in these kind of situations, you kind of feel vulnerable. So a lot of guys, for the fear of being in situations like that, just end up staying home more and not going out and shutting themselves off and struggling with anxiety and depression and all these kind of things.
Do you have words of advice for somebody? Because you're talking about how you did book tours and I met you in the States and just like you're doing your thing. And is there anything that like got you through? Because like even I can relate. Sometimes you don't feel like getting up. Like what gets you there? What gets you over that, like that thought to not to stay inside? Or
yeah, what it is with me is I'm at a stage now where nothing lasts forever. And I know that when you have your bad days, they'll pass, because they always do. Like the good times and bad days, these things always pass. And I think when we have our bad days, whether it be through sight loss, whether it be for anxiety, depression, whether you're just having a bad day and you're not affected by disability at all, the thing that gets us the most is we get frustrated. It's that frustration we take it out on ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think, I've learned to kind of remember that, I said it in that poem, I've learned to breathe while I still grieve. I'm grieving for the sight that I've already lost and the sight I'm yet to lose. I'm still anxious in all these situations because I know now that these feelings are perfectly natural and normal. And this is what I say to people: what you're going through, if you speak to other people or listen to the poetry that I write, it's all perfectly normal and perfectly natural. You're not going crazy. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to get depressed and have anxiety. Just don't stay there.
Mhm.
And don't beat yourself up about it. And I say I've learned to breathe while I still grieve, because these
That was so
things
powerful.
that I am anxious about that are perfectly normal still scare me. I still get anxious in all these kind of places, but I just won't let it stop me anymore. I've learned to breathe while I still grieve. I breathe myself through it. I go, okay,
Mhm.
this is fine to feel like that. I know why I'm feeling like that. I'm just going to do it. Or I allow myself to have the time to rest and recuperate. Nothing lasts forever. So just don't be too hard on yourself. Know that things, when you feel something, when you feel anxious, it's your body's way of kind of trying to protect you.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's that
it's
survival brain.
self-protection, isn't it?
But I have a question because I've been asking myself this question, like, you know how like when you're really scared to do something, or you're like you just have like that survival brain, or something's telling you like don't do it, but then you just do it anyway.
Yeah. My
The
wife Amy,
reward of that.
and I, we did a parachute jump,
Cool.
skydive, not last year, the year before, for a charity that I'm an ambassador for here in the UK called Henshaws, who support people with low vision, blindness, and a whole range of other disabilities. And so we did a charity skydive for them, and it was actually Amy's idea to do the skydive because she struggles with anxiety and depression, and she wanted to kind of confront her fears. She's the sort of person that gets nervous when she goes on a commercial plane, when they're taking off and landing, she's gripping on and stuff. So she just wanted to do something like that. And we jumped from 15,000 feet, which is, I think it's the highest one you can do in the UK, and absolutely loved it. And, we both went, and I was ridiculously calm. It was very strange. I don't, yeah, well, I even freaked out
Yeah,
I freaked out my instructor
that's
because he was just like,
hilarious.
Amy was like, "Are you nervous?" I was like, "No, I don't feel nervous." "Oh,
Yeah.
you'll get nervous when you get there." I got there, I was like, "No, I'm not. I just feel really like super chilled." And then I said to the instructor, he said, "Are you nervous yet?" I was like, "No." He said, "Once you get up there and you're about to go." Got up there, I was like, "No, fine." And I said to him, I said, before we went out, I said, what makes it a good kind of experience for you? Because you obviously do dives all the time. He said, well, it all depends on the position you kind of get yourself into.
I think they
And
like backflips.
all I was just concerned about was that he'd enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we landed, he was like, "You all right there?" I was like, "Yes." And how was it for you?
Oh my God.
Yeah, so yeah, but I remember we put it on YouTube, the video, and we did like some Facebook lives after the event. And I
Cool. I
remember
want to see. I
just
gotta check out your YouTube again. Oh, can I talk to you a little bit about your website and like tell me how you? It's like it's my favorite. Who does
yeah, you
your?
said you really like that, didn't
I'm
you?
obsessed. Who does all that?
Yeah, so Barry Asman, it's all down to him, really. As I said, he kind of the way I got connected with him. Once again, another strange story. So there's a lady called Barb Calhoun who is from West Virginia, and she's got Usher syndrome, so she's deaf blind, so not completely deaf, not completely blind. And that first poem that I read for you, the secret. So I have a secret from the world that most of you don't know. The one that I open up with, my very first poem. When she heard that in my first book, very similar situation to B Fox. She was struggling, newly diagnosed with Usher syndrome, losing a sight and a hearing, struggling with depression, anxiety. Found that poem, found that book, and it really helped her. And she contacted me saying, "Could I perform that poem at a poetry slam, but doing ASL sign language?"
Cool.
I was like, "Absolutely,
Oh
but
my
send me a video.
God.
I want to see what the poem looks like in ASL." So Barb did that. We connected, and then used to speak all the time. And then we eventually got to the stage where she was like,
Oh my
"I want
gosh.
to bring you out. I want you to come to America," because I had this huge following in America. Most of my my kind of following was in the States rather than the UK because of people. The difference in people between America and the UK is we're quite reserved and stiff upper lip. I'm not, but a lot of people are.
Step up there.
Yeah, that's what they say, stiff upper lip, isn't it? It's a UK thing. Whereas America, you kind of like overshare. You'll talk about everything, won't you? So that's why I fit in. That's why I fit in well with Americans. So she was like, "We've got to bring you to America," and she started contacting people. And she was under Barry's dad, who is a low vision specialist in Baltimore. And when she contacted Barry and told Barry about me, he was like, "We'll do it. We'll sponsor Dave and bring him over." So after we spent 4 weeks doing that tour this time last year, we connected with all the amazing things we did. And I just said, look, I really want you to look after, you get what I'm about. I want you to look after.
He fits your brand. Like your brand's cool. I feel like it's perfect.
The logo, there's the BP logo, which I've actually got. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually tattooed on my arm just there.
Oh, sweght.
And the B and the P is the British Braille for blind poet.
What's the one on your hand?
On my head. I've got a few. I've got loads.
It looks like an M or something.
So no, I'll tell you now. I've got like loads of tattoos, and I'll give you a brief overview. They're all to do with my low vision. So, for example, on my arm here, you can see briefly there, that is a portrait of a Greek philosopher writer called Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer,
one of my favorites.
And Homer was known as the blind poet.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, stop. So I never knew this.
Homer's the blind poet. He is the original blind poet, Homer.
What?
Yep. And so I've got Homer and Stand By Me RP on my shoulder. I've got on my wrist the eye from the cover of my books. Where's the camera there?
I can see it. With the heart.
I've got some fading clocks
on
my arm there, which shows the degrees of vision. So from 15 down to 5, which I'm at about 3 at the moment. Doing my sight loss. The initials on my hand are my stepson, so I've got H for Harvey.
Aww.
I've got an L for Louis.
Love them.
I've got a piece of my poetry on my arm there from a poem called Shift This Cloud, which is from my son Austin, which says, my son, be proud, we'll shift this cloud and dance in heavy rain. I'll show you all that's possible, strong heart and long white cane. I've got another piece on my arm here, which is from a song. Have you heard of an American singer called Babyface?
Oh, yeah. He's very romantical.
Wrote for Stevie
Beautiful
Wonder.
Voice. Oh, yeah. Stevie Wonder.
He wrote a song for his wife called "The Day You Gave Me a Son," and one of the lyrics in that is, I've got on my arm. I got this before I started to go blind, but it explains a couple of things. It says, "It's like a song I've never heard, I've never sung, but know the words." And that to me was like being a dad. Because I was so nervous about becoming a dad, but then when I became a dad, when Ellie was born, and certainly when Austin was born as well, it was like a song I've never heard, I've never sung, but know the words, because it just became natural to me. And that also is like my poetry as well, because I talk about this out of body experience I have when writing it. All the poems I write are like a song I've never heard, I've never sung, but know the words because of the way they come to me. So yeah, and I've got a little lion there as well with purple eyes, which I'm trying to do with this camera.
Tell me more about the lion. That's cool.
So the lion is, I've got a lion with, you can't really see it.
I can see.
So, can you? Full lion with purple eye. Purple eyes. The purple's the colour for RP, and the lion just is the kind of protector of the family and being a leader, which is what I do. Plus I'm a Leo.
Me too.
Hey, there we go.
I don't know. I'm attracting all these Leos to me lately. I love it.
It's that kind of confidence thing, and
When's your birthday?
21st of August.
Cool. I'm July 28th.
Hey. So yeah, I'm like kind of cusp, but yeah. So I've got lots of tattoos which are all kind of relate. The only one I've got that doesn't relate to my poetry is on my kind of shoulder at the back, or between my neck and my shoulder blades. I've got a bee. And the reason for the bee is, I don't know if you know this story. You might do, you might not. A couple of years ago, there was a terror attack in Manchester at an Ariana Grande concert, where a guy suicide bomber detonated himself and killed loads of kids in there. And it happened literally 2 miles down the road from where I am now. What happened was all the tattoo artists in the area did a thing where the symbol of Manchester is the Manchester bee, because Manchester's a city of industry, and the worker bee is kind of synonymous with it. And so they were tattooing Manchester bees on people, and all the money went to the families
Oh, it's
of the people.
beautiful.
So yeah, I've got
Wow.
my Manchester bee on there, which I'm very
Oh,
proud of.
I love your passion for kids and just, your love for kids. Beautiful. And who's in the picture behind you?
That's up there. That's me, Ellie, and Austin.
Cute.
I'll take you up so you can actually see it. So you can actually see what they look like. Can you?
A little to the right. Oh, angels. They look very happy.
Yes, they are. We're all about family. It was Ellie's birthday actually yesterday.
Oh, happy
Yesterday,
belated.
sorry, 2 days ago, 4th.
Oh.
So yeah.
All right. So I just want to be respectful of your time, but I have 3 more questions.
Sure.
Okay. So the first question is, what's your favorite food and or recipe? And I have a little insight on this already, but I want to hear more.
While I still have useful vision, I tend to do a lot of cooking in the house. My wife, says to me, the things you can do with your sight, while you've still got it, do it. So I do a lot of cooking, even though I spill stuff, and I read bedtime stories most nights from me and my son. We do Facebook Live bedtime stories and get people tuned in all over the world, which is really weird. But paella is my kind of go-to dish.
I think it's one of my favorites too. It's so good.
Yeah, I lived in when I worked as a singer in my younger days, I toured all over Europe, and I spent a lot of time in Ibiza and Mallorca. I was actually a dancer in Ibiza for the nightclubs out there for a while. But yeah, I lived in Mallorca, and at one of the hotels I was singing at, this chef taught me how to make a proper Mallorquin paella. So that's kind of my dish, and it's a lot of throwing stuff into a pan as well. So you don't have to be kind of precise with measurements.
Can I ask you one question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you cook the rice before or in it?
In it.
Okay, good. Can you tell me more?
Yeah. Oh God, no, not before. In it.
It's a question. I just wanted to know.
Do people cook it before?
People do that.
Do
I don't know. I just wanted to know.
Maybe in America.
Yeah. Any other tips? I need this recipe. I'm going to put it in the cookbook.
Most of it's kind of just the prep, really. It's kind of, I make different versions of it because, like, my kids they're not really big on seafood. So, like, if I'm just doing it for me and Amy, I'll do a proper one with seafood and big king prawns and everything else. But sometimes I'll maybe just do it with chicken or fish, but or chicken and peppers and lots of different things. So it's a case of you have a specific order for chucking stuff in the pan, but I tend to start with oil, garlic, and then I have chorizo will go in there, and the chorizo and the rice will then go in with the peppers and the onions to kind of the chorizo when you cook it in the oil tends to flavor the rice and color the rice as well, before you then get into adding, turmeric and paprika and and all the other spices.
All right.
But yeah, chuck it all in the pan.
So good.
Funny, I actually got told the story when the chef who taught me how to cook paella told me a folk story from Spain of how paella apparently was supposed to mean for her. And the way the folk story is that it was a husband and wife, and the wife had got sick, and the husband went into the kitchen and just basically emptied the cupboards out and chucked it all into the pan.
So
that was the very first way that paella was made.
I love that.
So yeah, I found that quite nice.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that so much. I don't know why food talk makes me so incredibly happy, but that just made me very happy.
Very stomach led.
Yeah. And then my next question is, if you could be a superhero, which you kind of are, but if you could pick a superpower, what would that be?
If I could pick a superpower, what would it be? It would be probably to fly, because it come in handy at the moment with COVID, because we're under, we've gone into full national lockdown here. We're under a travel ban. Literally, like I was supposed to be out in the States every 6 weeks for the whole year.
Man.
The week before we went into lockdown, here, I was due to fly out to DC to be the host, the first ever British host for the Helen Keller Awards.
Wow.
Which is like the Oscars for blind people. Previous winners of Helen Keller Awards has been Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and I was going to be hosting it in DC.
You're gonna be still.
Yeah, hopefully.
Touch
wood. Yeah, for the AFB, the American Federation of the Blind, they'd asked me to host it, and I was due to come out, and it was going to be an amazing night. and then we went into lockdown. So yeah, you asked me that, it would be the superpower of flight, so I can get back to America and do some of these amazing events.
That's awesome. I was camping the last few days and I was stargazing. I have a little app on my phone that could kind of like tell you what stars are in the sky. And
Well,
then I was looking.
you've hit a raw point with me there, because that's one of the things I miss so much, is the fact that because with the night blindness, I can't see stars anymore.
Well, there's
Yeah,
an
and
app.
I'd love to
There's
see.
an app you could, so
Is
just
there?
so you know what's up there. Like you could do it with your wife, and she could
Ah,
tell you what's up there.
send
It's
me a
really
link.
cool. I think my
Send me.
favorite is Mars anyway. It's the
Ah.
orange one.
Do you get
Um,
really great skies where you are then still? Do you still like,
where I went camping was in
yeah.
Montauk. It's like the beach, and we still get pollution from the city, but I think it's one of the places where you could see stars, like where I
I've
live.
not, I've probably not. I can't remember the last time I saw a sky like that. I can remember working on cruise ships years ago and seeing, those kind of, being out in the middle of nowhere and all the stars,
Mhm.
and feeling so kind of
Like significant.
insignificant. Yeah, absolutely insignificant. And that just, and my kids haven't seen that because we get so much pollution
Oh
these days.
man.
It's very difficult to see. You see the North Star, and my son Austin will always wave at the North Star and say that's Grandpa, because we tell
Aw.
him that's Grandpa looking at him.
That was
Um,
my favorite when I was younger too.
yeah, but I definitely
Oh,
love
you know
to
what's
see.
so weird? So I downloaded an app that told me what planes were flying. There wasn't a lot. And the
Yeah,
one
I've
that
seen
I
that.
saw was from London.
Oh, cool.
And I was like thinking to myself, people think of like, who would have ever thought we'd be in an airplane, right?
Mhm.
There has to be a better way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like there has
Uh-huh.
to be another way that we could travel. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
be
definitely.
weird or anything, but I did think of it.
No,
I did think that thought.
it's. I mean, I'm sure stuff like that. Hopefully, we'll see stuff like that in our lives. It is almost like living in the future now with some of
Yeah.
the tech that's out there. It's crazy. You see some of
Mhm.
the things that you can do with tech now. It's proper living in the future.
Absolutely. And my last thing, I want to ask you if there's anything. Honestly, I always like to check in with my guests and see like maybe there's something that was challenging for you during this COVID time, that you work through that would help inspire the audience, or if there's anything like that's on your heart that you want to share.
Yeah, I mean, COVID is really, really difficult. For especially, it was difficult for everyone. Well, I remember when we first went into kind of lockdown, and it really, was spreading around the world. I had this thing in my head where I felt like actually it was a really good thing for people like me, because not maybe not good thing is the right word, but what I was getting at is it was almost like the whole world had stepped into the world of someone with a disability, because all of a sudden we were all dealing with isolation. We were all dealing with anxiety in different forms. And I felt like people would be able to kind of understand more what it's like for someone with a disability or someone with low vision like myself. And also people like me could maybe, take the lead a bit more and be there for people, who were going through these things for the first time. So I kind of took the lead. That was actually the start of why I started to do these tea and poetry Zoom calls every Wednesday, was because I wanted to start a platform where people could talk about that. And people with low vision, and blindness are really struggling with social distancing. I have no spatial awareness. So, I feel even more anxious now going out. And I've heard of people who I know actually being shouted at for being too close or using a
Oh
cane
God.
and not following the signs because they can't see them. Or there was a friend of mine who had Usher syndrome, deafblind, and she was on a train with a sister. And because they're exempt from wearing masks, because she can't lip read with a mask on, obviously, she got shouted at by some woman, like abused on a train, for even though they explained to her that she was deaf and they were trying to lip read and couldn't, wear a mask. And so there's a lot of people that are really struggling with
Yeah.
that at the moment. But these Zoom calls I'm very proud of, because it's like everything you're doing. We're using social media to connect people and get us through and talk about these things, which is where it comes from. And it gives me more inspiration for poetry as well.
Mhm.
And I've
Wish
written
I.
poetry about COVID. So yeah.
Oh, I would love to share one of those as well. Because I
Okay.
feel like we're kind of taking a step backwards in a lot. I don't know, I know a lot of places in Europe, you're going back into lockdown. So, I feel like it's really important right now, as I'm
I've got
sure there's,
I've got one here if you want. One
I would
second.
love.
Let me just pull it up because I've
I
got them
just want
all.
to honor Ben. He's been watching, and I just looked at the comments. I was so into our conversation, I didn't get a chance to say hi to everyone that's watching.
Okay, I'll read this for you now. This is when I did the first team poetry call. We wrote this. I wrote this, I should say, off the conversation we had with people about how they were feeling. And the week after, I debuted the poem. But this kind of says it all. In times like these, we all can feel a little more alone. The whole world's isolating. Our anxiety has grown. A virus sweeping coast to coast that none of us can see. It's time we pulled together. Though apart, let's still be we. We all can play our role in helping others who feel low. Our mental health is vital when we've got no place to go. But keeping social distance, staying home, all that we can. It's saving lives. Let's stop the rise. This is the only plan. Let's use all social media. Connect this world wide web with all the things that people need till waves of sickness ebb. So let's never forget that together we will cope. I'm sending out these rhyming words, this poetry of hope. We've won our independence. We can do it now once more. Whilst living with low vision, I've been trapped behind my door. I know there's plenty out there who, like me, know how it feels when things out of our control our independence steal. When all of this is over and the virus is no more, let people come together like they never have before. Too long we've been divided by the things that shouldn't count. Let's learn from our mistakes. Let's be kind in large amounts.
Whew. Thank you so much. And
So welcome.
I don't know how we connected, but I'm forever grateful for you. I love you. If there's anything I could do to serve you, anything I could.
There's something that everyone can do for me, which is basically just tell more people about the poetry and the words. You know, spread the word, tell people about the blind poet. The more people I can kind of, you know, I see the impact it's had within my community, the poetry, and how it's helped people. And all I strive to do every day is to reach more people. So anything that anyone can do, you know, is just tell more people about what I'm trying to do.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that's a wrap for tonight. Thank you guys for watching. There's a few people here. Ben's here, Cynthia. There's a couple of people that are saying they're going to reach out to you and connect on your website.
Theblindpoet.net. Theblindpoet.net.
A lot of love and thank you again. I can't wait to rewatch this.
It's been great. It's been an absolute blast, and I knew we'd have a great time.
Absolutely.
You know, I tell you know we have a connection, and I love your energy, and I know you know you're striving to help people just in the same way that I am, which is what it's all about.
Absolutely. All right. Happy Friday, and I send love to you and your family and everybody that's watching. I hope you have an incredible weekend, and I can't wait to be back.
Yeah,
love you guys.
You too.
Love you, Dave.
Thank you. Love you too. Bye.
Ciao.